about money. With your host, CPA and forensic accountant, Sam Rosenfarb.
You're watching It's All About Money, and nobody knows more about money than accountants. Hi, I'm Sam Rosenfarb. I'm a forensic accountant. I've been an accountant for over 30 years, and I can tell you from experience that people are irrationally motivated by money. I've been involved in numerous disputes about money, brothers and sisters fighting about how to split up the money left to them by their parents. Can you imagine that? Husbands and wives fighting the War of the Roses after living together for many years. I've been involved in partnership disputes, business disputes with partners who've known each other for 10, 20, 30 years who virtually kill each other over money. I've seen people steal from the government, cheat on their taxes, steal from their employers, steal from their children's trust. I've seen people's greed control their behavior. This show is all about educating you, teaching you how you can control, how you can spend, how you can invest, and learn about money and its proper place in your life. Today's show is about divorce and what you need to know about protecting your money. How much will you have to give up in a divorce? How much can you expect to get? How much child support or alimony will you have to pay? With me are two of New Jersey's most prominent divorce attorneys. Ed Snyder heads the matrimonial department at the large Roseland, New Jersey law firm of Wolf & Sampson. He has been noted as one of the best lawyers in America and was also named by New Jersey Monthly magazine as one of New Jersey's best. Ed has lectured all across the country on divorce and custody matters. Also with me is Susan Reach Winters, graduated cum laude from both Rutgers University and Seton Hall Law School, where she returned as a law professor. Susan's authored numerous articles and books for divorce lawyers. She's a partner at the Short Hills law firm of Bud Larner, where she practices matrimonial law. Susan, what made you decide to become a divorce lawyer?
Well, it was more by way of attrition than anything else. I started out as a business lawyer representing business people. And when those business people got in divorce situations, they looked around for another lawyer, and I said, how about me? I was there. I already knew a lot about the inner workings of their businesses and their incomes and things that had to do with divorce. And so little by little, I started taking on their divorce cases, and now that's all I do.
It can be risky representing a business client in divorce, because if you don't do a good job, not only do you not handle another divorce for them or referral from them, but you may lose their business as well.
It's not even if you don't do a good job. It's that they don't like the result. You could do a great job.
Right. The clients usually not like the result?
It can happen. It's a very emotional field.
Well, I had to be the first one to tell these business people that their businesses were part of the pot when it came to equitable distribution. And that was the first thing they didn't like hearing from me.
What is equitable distribution? What does that mean?
Equitable distribution is how you split up the assets that are acquired during the marriage at divorce. And it's not equal distribution, it's equitable distribution. So you don't have to split up the assets 50-50. A lot of different assets are split 50-50, Sam, and others are not shared equally.
Like what? What wouldn't be shared equally?
Well,
Some
possibly the business, a business. You know, the problem here is, Sam, is that the average person who comes into you doesn't know that there are certain assets that are subject to equitable distribution.
Well, what do they think? They think that they're going to get divorced, and the business that they run is going to remain with them.
Look at that.
No, they think because they did it, it's theirs.
Because they ran this business.
They ran the business, it's their pension.
Either husband or wife.
Oh,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. And equitable is one of the terms that causes a problem, because equitable is fair, and fair, as you know, is in the eyes of the beholder. And what may be fair to the business owner may not be fair to the business owner's spouse.
So if a guy gets married with a little business, let's assume he runs a little internet business, and 10 years later he gets divorced, and he becomes another Bill Gates, or a Bill Gates wannabe, and he's worth a few $100 million. Is that growth?
Well, that's really not not a
typical example.
That's not a typical example, Sam.
What's a typical example?
Well, I'll tell you. This Susan and I have these cases all the time where they get married, and let's use not the Microsoft example, but let's use, I just finished one where he owned a small publishing business, and the publishing business was worth about, let's say, about $100,000 on the date of the marriage, and then they got divorced, and the accountants like yourself, Sam, it wasn't you in this particular case, valued it.
Unfortunately, we've got to rectify that.
Yes, valued it at $750,000. Therefore, the increment, or the $650,000, is subject to equitable distribution. The theory being it was part of the result of the marital partnership.
Now, different appraisers differ as to whether or not the business is worth $750,000.
Well,
right? His appraiser might think it's only worth a nickel.
Let me tell you a case that I just finished up. That we had two accountants. This is not a made-up story. It's unbelievable. We just finished a trial, and the wife's accountant said the business is worth $4.5 million.
$4.5 million.
And
the wife didn't own the business.
No,
the husband.
no. Husband owned 50% of the business, and the husband's accountant said, and there's a lot more to it than this, that it was worth $600,000. Of course, you know what the judge did? She appointed her own accountant.
So now you have three accountants: his accountant, her accountant, and a judge's
there were really
accountant.
4 accountants. But we don't have to get into that.
So, is it? I'm a business appraiser. It seems unrealistic that a business could be worth either $600,000 or $4.5 million. That's a huge range. Is that typical?
Well, I think it is typical because there's one intangible in every valuation, which is called goodwill. And that's particularly bothersome when you have a service business like a lawyer or an accountant, a doctor, a dentist, somebody who says, but I am the business. Without me, there is no business. And there's a value that's attributed to that.
Well, let's assume this husband has a business worth $300,000, and the business is all him for the most part.
There's a lot of validity to that.
Yeah, where does he get the money to pay?
Says. Well, you know, there's going to have to be maybe an offset against other assets, but there's a lot of validity to a lawyer. Let's take a lawyer who is a sole practitioner.
I could tell a lawyer joke, but I won't.
Well, we love lawyers jokes. We love lawyers jokes. You know, let's take this lawyer who's a sole practitioner, and he's just working to make a living and to support his family. And all of a sudden, he's told, your business is worth $300,000? Well, you can take the business. I'll open up another one.
Right. But then he has to pay his wife a percentage of that business and then continue, assuming the lawyer is a man in this case, and then continue to pay spousal support out of the same income that's being generated by that business.
That is probably the reason that judges do not distribute that business 50-50, because he has to use that money that he earns in the future to support his family. But now what happens if, let's say, this hypothetical, it's really not hypothetical, it happens all the time. The wife was his secretary for all these years. What happens then? Not only does she raise the family, take care of him, take care of the house, but she takes care of his office. Does she deserve?
Her percentage goes up.
Yeah, I'd say her percentage goes up.
Closer to 50% or beyond 50%?
Well, never. I don't see it beyond.
Closer to 50%.
I don't see it beyond 50%.
And the percentage is when it's below 50%. In my experience, it's never much below 25%. Somewhere between 25 and 50.
I just finished a case where the judge made a determination that the wife, I represented the husband, the wife was a hindrance to the business, and still gave her 35%.
35% of the value.
Because there's a recognition in the law that the spouse who isn't running the business is running the household, raising the children, being the date for entertaining clients and things of that nature.
So even if she's a hindrance, she still has some value.
Well, they say, there's a case that say even sparring partners, I forget, even sparring partners add to the value of the business.
It creates some spice and it creates some juices flowing, so it
makes him want to get out of the house so that he's working more.
Right.
What did you mention pension plans before, 401k plans? How do you get to split those? Tell our viewers what people actually have to split their pension plans with their spouses. How do they do that?
Well, there are a few ways they can do it. If it's an IRA, that can be rolled over. There's an IRS rule that says you can roll over IRAs tax-free. So if husband does that to wife, when she becomes age, what is it, 59 and a half, 50, she can withdraw that money, and then she'll have to pay the taxes. The husband doesn't pay the taxes. Any other retirement plan other than an IRA has to be done by way of a qualified domestic relations order called a quadro. It's pretty boring stuff, really. You want us to go into that? We can if you want.
I think even in the IRA, if somebody's under 59 and a half and they begin to take out a set amount each time under annuity, they can continue to do that without a penalty, but they do have to pay income tax.
That's right.
On that. So
I also have a number of cases where the spouse who owns the pension, who earned the pension, wants to buy out the other spouse now and give that spouse some percentage and put fix a dollar value now and just give her cash or give him cash, whatever the case might be.
But then that cash wouldn't be taxed. Right?
Exactly, because it's incident to the divorce. It's part of equitable distribution, which isn't taxable. So he keeps the whole pension, she gets some cash. The pension, when he gets it, will be all taxed.
So
the cash she gets is...
So he's paying her tax.
Well, but you wouldn't in that case do a 50-50 split. You would take into consideration the tax effect down the line, exactly.
And do some of these business people who come to you for divorce, do they get surprised that their pensions and their businesses are subject to equitable...
They're flabbergasted.
They're shocked.
Especially, now, you know, the sophisticated businessman or businesswoman who owns an interest in a large corporation, has the stock for that, they're not surprised, but it's the little guy who says, what? You know, what is this worth?
Right.
They're really very much surprised.
It's very interesting that a guy can be married, own his own business, and during the lifetime of the marriage, control all the finances, control how much money his wife gets, control how much money she spends, control how much money he invests. And then they get divorced, and all of a sudden she's his partner. He's shocked that she's his partner.
Yeah.
Why is that a shock to people? Is it a lack of education?
People don't know about the divorce process.
Right. And
that's why we're doing this show.
Yeah.
So what could they know? How could this education help them? What could they do about reducing their exposure?
Well, I don't think you should go into anything blind. And anybody who is going to be divorced really has to read up on it beforehand and educate himself or herself. The American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, an organization that you know of, Sam, and one that's dear to my heart, has a great handbook. It's called a client handbook, and I give it out to all my new clients. It's terrific. It's written on a national level, but it's about 100 pages. It's just terrific in educating the potential client.
What does a typical divorce cost, Susan?
Well, there is no such thing as a typical divorce. Certainly people who are more educated and who are more rational get divorced for much less money because they're willing to do the right thing. They're not going to fight with their lawyers over what is the law. They're going to accept what their lawyers tell them is the law and be guided accordingly. But I'd like to comment on something Ed just said in terms of being educated, because that really helps when you're going through a divorce to know what the law is and to accept what it is. And I think you ought to know that before you get married, not when you're talking about getting a divorce, but when you enter into a marriage, assuming you're not 17 years old, you're going to get yourself educated and understand that 20 years later and 3 or 4 kids later and a business later, you're not going to be blindsided by what you thought was yours all these years is not yours, it's ours.
Do you think we'd have less marriage if we had people who are educated about divorce?
Yes, we would.
Well, we might have more prenuptial agreements.
And would that be good? Less marriage, more prenups?
Susan says that this should happen, and I wholeheartedly agree with her. As a matter of fact, there are programs springing up all over the country in the high schools and colleges to teach people about marriage and divorce, so they'll know what they're getting into at the marriage, and they'll know what they're getting into if they get divorced.
But then it's becoming almost like a business, like a business partnership.
It's all about money, Sam.
Well, it's all about money.
That's the name of this program. It's all about money.
On that comment, bear with us. We'll be back in a short while with Ed Snyder and Susan Winters to talk about how you could protect your assets in divorce. Thanks.
shame what drug use on the job did to this guy, how it affected his career, shook up his family, and left him jobless. Of course, the real tragedy is this guy's never taken a drug in his life. When businesses get hurt by drug abuse, everyone takes the hit. Call and find out about our drug-free workplace program.
This is the QVC Local, and if you make a great product that you've been selling around your state, it could really change your life. No, it can't make deliveries for you or take your associates out for a night on the town, but it can broadcast your product live to QVC's millions of buyers during the 1997 Quest for America's Best, QVC's 50 and 50 Tour. Call 1-888-5050-USA to see if your product is eligible for the Quest, and when the QVC Local comes to town, your small business could very well become big business.
Hi, this is Sam Rosenfarb. You're watching It's All About Money with Ed Snyder and Susan Winters. Right before the break, Ed, we were talking about how much a divorce cost, the typical divorce. And as Susan said, not any divorce is typical. But what about the husband and wife who married for 7 or 8 years? Is there any standards you could provide?
That has nothing to do with it, Sam. Divorce costs, in most cases, much more than it should. And it has to do with the characters involved in the divorce. It has to do with the husband and the wife and the 2 lawyers. Mostly the husband and the wife, because divorce is such an emotional thing. You don't live with somebody in the highest form of intimacy that 2 people can live in for years and then say, okay, we're getting divorced, shake hands, we're out of here, let's arrive at a settlement. So they're very much emotional. There's a lot of anger and there's a lot of hurt. And they want to fight. And then what happens is they see what the bills are, but then it depends. They still might want to fight, but that's the reason that divorce costs so much.
How do you sue these clients when they want to fight? What do you do with them? How do you try to calm these angry people?
Well, I remind them as often as I can how much it is costing them, because on an hourly basis, which is the way divorce lawyers charge for their time, it adds up very, very quickly. And if someone wants me to go to war over $5,000, I want to point out to them that it may cost them 10.
What do you think of mediation?
I love it. We've discussed that before. I'm very much in favor of mediation. It's the divorce lawyers, and I'm one of them, and I'm going to admit this because they're all my friends and they're all my colleagues, but it's the divorce lawyers who are against mediation, and they're absolutely wrong. Mediation is good for everybody.
I think it's good with the right set of people. You've got to have 2 people who are equal in the sense that they trust one another, they were both equally involved in the finances during the marriage. That's the rare couple. You're going to find much more of a traditional couple looking for divorce.
Do you think the battles are fueled by divorce attorneys, as a lot of people think?
You want to handle that one?
I think only sometimes, and certainly not Ed or myself. But there are adversaries. I was telling Ed on the way over here about one that I have right now that I feel is fueling a case. There's very little assets. It's a short marriage. There are a couple of children, but they're fighting over nothing.
More fees are generated when the case is fueled.
There are more fees in this case already than the assets.
You want to know something? If you give us any fact situation, you write it down on a piece of paper, and you give it to Susan and I, and you ask us how this case settled, I'll bet you if we wrote it down, we would come within 5% of each other. And any good matrimonial lawyer would do that. That's got to tell you something about, why these cases are dragging out and why they cost so much. When they fight about things like the pots and pans and the sofa and the wine collection.
The wine collection
may be worth fighting. I can understand that, right.
Yeah. Well, do they value the wine collection? Is that subject to equitable distribution?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it can be very, very valuable.
Right.
And another thing, Susan and I
expensive too.
Yeah, another thing, yes.
Yes.
And another thing, Susan, except I had a case where I represented the wife, and while they had all kinds of early vintage Bordeaux's in their cellar. When the case was just started, all of a sudden they had 1992 Chardonnays.
Which is not nearly as valuable.
No, so they were gone. And he said, "What wine collection?" It's my word against yours.
It's like a Heisman Trophy can sometimes disappear.
Absolutely.
It's coin collections, stamp collections, frequent flyer miles.
Frequent flyer miles. Yeah, that's a great asset. That's important value, right?
Yeah, of course it has value. And executives are traveling all the time. They travel 2 weeks out of a month. And all those miles accumulate. And the airline will transfer the miles from one spouse to another if they have a court order.
Only with a court order.
Oh, of course, because they're non-transferable most of the time.
They're in one person's name.
Ed, you recently gave a talk to the CPA Society in New Jersey on the Sheridan case. What's the Sheridan case?
Oh.
Tell our viewers about Sheridan, because for those viewers who don't know anything about Sheridan, who fit the profile of Sheridan, it can be devastating.
Sheridan is a good case, I think, and it's a fair and honest case, and but it's bad for the bad people who break the law. And what it says is, and it's only a trial court opinion, but the judges universally follow Sheridan. And what Sheridan says is, if any Mr. Judge or Mrs. Judge, if any testimony comes before you that looks like fraud or fraud of the IRS or any kind of hanky-panky, you've got to report that to the authorities.
So if a wife gets on the stand and testifies about her husband hiding income from the IRS, then that forces the judge to refer it?
It does, and the difficulty is if you represent that wife, you've got to counsel her that by doing that, she may also be in trouble, because chances are she filed a joint tax return with her husband during those years when her husband was not reporting the cash.
And if she knew about it and benefited by it, she may have some exposure.
You know more about that than we do, Sam. There's the innocent spouse doctrine, and who was an innocent spouse and who isn't an innocent spouse.
Very few people are innocent spouses.
Well, I have
generally. If they knew or if they benefited by this unreported income, they're not innocent.
Well, how about this? How about a wife who works in her husband's office who's a dentist? And she's the one who
you gotta watch those dentists.
Yeah, always. Oh, no, I love all dentists. Anyway, and she's the one who collects the money and the checks and takes the cash during the marriage, during the good days. And this is not an unusual case. And now she sees a lawyer. They're getting divorced, and she said, "It ain't right what he says on his tax return." Because I know. I used to collect the cash. Well, how do you handle that one? What do you do there?
What do you do? Do you get an arbitrator involved? Do you get?
You try to settle the case. You try to bring in accountants to help you settle the case, so that we can put it all out on the table without a judge hearing it.
You never go to court. If you need to try the case, you try to stipulate certain facts. Like you can get together with your adversary and say, "We're going to stipulate that instead of the $200,000 he reported, his income is $275,000 a year," and then you can just put that fact before the judge.
But isn't it generally, if you could stipulate to the facts, you could probably settle the case?
Absolutely.
Because if you could be that agreeable,
absolutely,
you could probably settle the case. So what could our viewers do? Those that are contemplating divorce, they have unreported income, they have a little business, be it a deli, delicatessen, or a gas station, or a video rental place. Little business worth somewhere between $75,000 and $150,000, or pizzeria. Pizzeria very dear and near to my heart, and they're not reporting all their income. What should they do?
They don't. The first thing
just don't get a divorce.
Susan, right? Oh no, they can get to it. They don't go to court with that.
Right.
They don't go to court. You might arbitrate it. But you
arbitrate is a rent-a-judge, something like that.
Well,
just buy a person to make a decision?
No, it's a little bit different. They have rent-a-judge in California. We don't have that. It's not called rent-a-judge. It's euphemistically called. It's called private judging. I'm in favor of that too, but that would be a whole other program. Arbitration is just where you hire an arbitrator and it's binding. There are some problems with arbitration, but there are a lot of advantages to arbitration. An arbitrator may not have to turn that information into the IRS.
The arbitrator may not.
May
He doesn't
not.
have that.
Underscore the word may. We're not sure about that.
But we don't know what the arbitrator's
Yeah, we
obligations
don't.
are, right? There's not
Right.
enough case law to know.
But if someone's contemplating a divorce in that situation, they ought to start reporting their income or be prepared to pay their spouse what is rightfully the percentage that the spouse deserves based on the real numbers, not on the numbers that everybody knows are not correct in a tax return.
Is everything they own subject to split at the time of divorce?
Well, it depends how they owned it. That's not everything.
Not everything.
Everything that was acquired during the marriage, or some assets that were acquired before the marriage that have an incremental value.
How do they split income? The person's earning $500 a week, and he's got a wife who stays home and takes care of his infant child. How much could he expect to pay his wife in alimony and/or child support?
Well, that's based on the lifestyle during the marriage to a great extent when it comes to alimony. Child support is pretty much set by guidelines, and New Jersey just adopted a set of guidelines that no one's figured out yet, as far as I can tell.
They're pretty new, right?
They're brand new. They'll be effective as of September 1, I believe.
Right.
But let's assume this couple earns $500 a week or $800 a week, and they're spending every penny. I mean, they're like,
how do you do it, Sam?
Right.
How do two people with $500 a week income and 2 kids, how do they separate and support the whole family?
And live in 2 separate households.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
I mean,
they could do it when they were under 1 roof, but now they're under 2 roofs
Those
with 2
people
mortgages.
should stay married.
Right.
No, really. They can't afford a divorce.
I wanted to point something out before when Ed said about everything being in the pot for equitable distribution. The statute does exempt certain assets that were acquired during the marriage. Inheritances are exempt, meaning they're not in the pot to be split.
So if my grandmother gives me a painting as a result in her will, and I keep that painting, during the marriage we enjoy the painting, we look at the painting, but when we get divorced, the painting stays with the person who received it from his grandmother.
Unless the other spouse makes an argument that when you hung that in the living room and gave her the ability or him the ability to enjoy it for all those years, you commingled it, and that's the difficulty. And a better example would be cash.
Well, that's a very creative argument.
If you inherit $10,000 in cash and you put it into a joint account with your spouse, it's gone. It's now marital. You've got to keep it separate and apart. That's right.
So what should somebody do who inherits?
Well, that's easy.
Separate it.
Right.
Keep it
separate.
And I think most people know that now, who inherit a lot of money. Keep it separate.
Keep premarital property separate.
Absolutely.
Keep inheritances separate.
Absolutely, and never commingle it. But the other issue about that is, should you use that to support the marital estate? You know, should you? And that's an issue that hasn't been touched upon in New Jersey.
Keep it separate. That's
Definitely.
the advice you're getting from New Jersey's preeminent divorce attorneys. This is Sam Rosenfarb. If you have any questions about tonight's show, give me a call or write to me, 75 Livingston Avenue, Roseland, New Jersey, 07068. Call me at 201-535-1300 or 973-535-1300. Thank you.